Welcome back to the Business Insider. Tonight we're talking about the SDGs and green development. With us on the line is Dr. Fatah Badr, Professor of Science, Helwan University. He's also the rapporteur of the Environmental Research Council at the Academy of Scientific Research and Technology, who will be talking to us about Egypt's efforts to transform into the green economy and execute environment-friendly projects. Dr. Fatah, happy Eid to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me, and Ramadan Kareem.
Allahu Akram. And now it's happy Eid. All right, let's talk about green growth. Green growth. Yeah. What does that entail?
Green growth means using environmentally friendly projects with minimum emission of gases that causes global warming. For example, renewable energy, such as green hydrogen, which is actually Egypt is very active and have a political will to change to green energy. And only yesterday we signed some agreements for the production of green.
We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that in a moment. But green growth requires, you said, transformation into technologies that are friendly to the environment.
The environment,
right.
That's good.
However, transforming to the green growth around the world requires funds, requires money in order to fund this transformation. Is this a challenge to global transformation towards environment-friendly resources?
Yeah, in the short term, that would be a challenge to establish the requirements and the factories. But in the longer term, it would be profitable. And for the shorter term, I think funding should be available from the countries which produce gases, which actually cause global warming and climate change. And for the time being, there will be serious negotiations in the COP27 how much funds developing countries should gain from the other countries to start environmentally friendly projects.
All right. How do we have a strategy to transform through the use of green energy, transform to green energy production?
Yes, I think we have, because this is the official policy of the Egyptian government, and it has been approved by international organizations that calls for reducing gases and transformation to green ecology to minimize the impact, the massive impact or the negative impact of the climate change on the environment.
Right. How are we incorporating this strategy? What projects have been implemented? What has been achieved? And what are the challenges?
The major project now is the new projects for green hydrogen production in the Suez Canal investment area. And there is some cooperation with some international institutions and also some Egyptian institutions to establish the strategy and the basis for the production of other environment-friendly energy sources. Not only hydrogen, but other factors as well to limit the emissions from the factories. But in the longer term, we have two ways to deal with the climate change and the impact of climate change and the environment. The first is to adaptation, to adapt our policies to cope with the environmental change, and the other strategy is to mitigate the environmental change. Egypt is actually, the official policy is adaptation, because we are not gases producing country. We follow the adaptation policy. And in our policy, we actually plan and to have a good strategy for producing energy alternatives that does not actually produce gases to limit the climate change.
What policies need to be modified to encourage this shift?
To establish some laws to prevent or stop using some old ways to control the production of gases from the existing factories, and to update the available machines with new ones to minimize the production of gases.
So you said you need legislative shift, legislative modifications.
Yeah.
Do you also need incentives?
We need incentives, of course. We need regulations.
Such as, are there success stories that we can emulate? What incentives can be implemented?
Incentive is to exempt from some taxes for some years, for example. To encourage production by involving the private sector, and to giving some incentive to the private sector to participate in building these factories, because the government cannot do everything, and the investments need other sectors of the society as well. It may also be a good idea to involve the public itself by participating in or contributing to the investment in the eco-friendly factories or production of new alternative gases.
You know, two news items last week. One was EDF Renewables was signing with the Sovereign Fund of Egypt, the SFE, to produce green fuel for ships. So green fuel is definitely something that is lucrative for major investments. How do you view such an industry?
Great. In my view, it's great, because if you transform environment polluting gas into an eco-friendly gas, and to use it for ship, and you know ship travel long distances, then that would be the right step to transform other means of transport as well. And in the future, we may replace gas with hydrogen, and the other stage is to replace chemical energy sources with solar energy.
Right.
And to use electric cars instead of gas cars.
You know, another show of interest, if you will, was by a major U.S. conglomerate which voiced its interest to invest around $200 million to produce green fuels for aircraft in Egypt. How does this fare for Egypt as the energy hub of the region when you can also position yourself as the center for the production of green energy, whether you're talking ships, whether you're talking aircraft, and so on?
Yes, aircraft requires very clean gases, of course. And there was some attempts to obtain oil for aeroplanes from some plants like Jatrova and so on. But I think that project has not been so successful as the people has hoped. But with the new approaches of hydrogen, that may be the right way to produce safe, or not safe actually. There is no energy source that's completely safe, but at least less environment toxic than the current sources of energy for driving either ships or aeroplanes. But aeroplanes, of course, consume a lot of energy, and if that is clean energy, that would be worth of investment. I would encourage such a project in the investment area in Sinai and Suez Canal area as well.
One final question. If you are to advise on where the greatest opportunity is for green growth, what would you say?
I would say first recycling of some products in waste, for example, to produce eco-friendly sources of energy. There is biotic sources and the abiotic sources of energy. So biotic sources, we can recycle the waste and other means to produce energy. And the other recycling is one, and the other one is the hydrogen project, which we start shortly with some foreign investors as well.
Dr. Abdel Badr, Professor of Science, Helwan University, thank you very much for joining us, sir. Happy Eid to you.
I thank you, sir, and thank you for having me, and happy Eid to you and your family as well, and also to our viewers.
Thank you very much. A pleasure having you. All right, on that note, I take the opportunity to wish all our viewers a very, very happy Eid, to people in Egypt and around the world. I'm Ayman Salah. Good night.